All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 16th Annual CineYouth Film Festival. This is the Q&A for our LGBTQ plus program entitled A New Outlook. My name is Ray. I am on the CineYouth Programming Committee. I'm very, very excited to welcome these wonderful and talented filmmakers here to the Q&A. I'm going to ask everyone to please introduce themselves and then say just a word or two about the film you're here representing. Let's start with Connor, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Connor. I am a student at University of Southern California, currently graduating in just a couple weeks here. The film I have at CineYouth is Affection. I made this in my junior year, so just a year and a half or so ago. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Tessa, can you please go next?
Hey everyone, my name is Tessa. The film that I have in this program is called This is a Teenage Love Letter. It is a short that follows two girls and their relationship, figuring out themselves and each other, and kind of ask questions about how to navigate distance. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, we'll get into a lot more pretty soon here. And Lauren, please.
Hi, my name's Lauren. I'm a filmmaker based in upstate New York currently, and the film that I have in the program is Tender Hearts. It's an experimental short kind of investigating intimacy and the gray areas around like domestic violence and like sexual abuse. So
Thank you so much. I'm particularly excited to host this Q&A today because I believe it's always been very rare that we see honest portrayals of queerness and queer characters in film, and even more so queer joy. That's a thing that we don't really see very often in films, and that's what really excites me about this. And I think sort of our generation of filmmakers is becoming even more and more aware of the importance and weight that representation of queer stories can have. So with that being said, Connor, I'd like to start with you. So your film Affection, you spoke about it. I feel that the dynamic of the main characters in your film is one that's important to note. It's not just based on the fact that these are two queer men, but it's also an interracial queer couple. And I think that can resonate with a lot of people. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about how you wrote that story and how that dynamic came into play?
Yeah, absolutely. Writing this story was tricky for me because I've never made a project in the past that's been, I don't want to say close to home, but has been so much about my experience as a gay person. And so, after a lot of months of searching for what is my script for this junior project going to be and running up against the deadline and not having anything, I got some really good advice from a friend that like just write what you know and write what you can talk about. And I wrote this story about two young gay men in very different positions when it comes to their comfort in public and their comfort with showing affection in public. And that's kind of, to me, the crux of the film that's the primary difference between them. And when I wrote the script, I did not specify race. And so in casting, I was really just looking for who was the best for the role. Justin, who ended up being my lead, brought a lot of really, really great personal experience with this to the role, and we had a lot of really great discussions about that. And so to answer your question, I think like my film focuses on how these two gay men coming from different comfort levels reconcile that between themselves. And I was sure to let Justin bring whatever he felt, like you said, the element of an interracial couple into that as well. And again, we had a lot of great discussions about that. But yeah, writing this script, it was primarily about that difference between the two.
Yeah, I think once you mentioned that you and Justin collaborated so much on what that role was, that really makes a lot of sense because it does feel so personal. And he has a wonderful performance in this film, so that really does make a lot of sense. Um, I want to talk to Lauren about the visual style of your film. It's really beautiful. It's very enticing, and I saw that you shot this on Super 8. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about what the process was like and what your experience was like shooting on Super 8? And have you worked with Super 8 before?
Yeah, I love shooting with Super 8. I knew so whenever I started really more seriously working on this project. I shot it about 2 summers ago now. I always knew that I wanted to work with Super 8. I just like it feels really intimate. I like the color space that it brings. And I knew that I wanted to be shooting in a mix of still photo and moving image. And so that was just kind of a good grab bag of everything I was looking for. Shooting with Super 8 is honestly really simple. So it's you usually just pop a cartridge in and you can kind of get going. So it definitely saved a bit of time in terms of on set production when we were kind of getting ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's something that I've always, as a filmmaker, have been very enticed by. I've always really wanted to work with Super 8,
Mhm.
and it seems a little bit intimidating at first, but then when you realize you kind of just pop a cartridge in and go and just kind of work with what you got,
Mhm.
it's a little bit freeing,
Yeah.
as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Um, on that on that vein of visual style, Tessa, I wanted to talk to you about the visual style of not only the film we're discussing in this Q&A, this is a teenage love letter, but the other film that you have in CineYouth this year. They both have very distinct visual styles, and they're quite gorgeous to look at. Could you tell us a little bit about developing that style?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess for context, the other piece that I have in CineYouth is in the COVID category. And it's very much opposite to this one in that it's just a piece that I shot, screen recorded on my laptop, and it's with me, and all the other media shot on my phone. And so, but for this piece, this is a teenage love letter. So this is a film that I made at the very end of my high school film programs when I was in grade 12, which is in from my school, a very huge deal. We do a screening in a big theater, and it's this is what defines who you were in this program. And so I had thought about it for since I entered the program in grade 9. I really wanted to do my best work possible. And so this is the one of the first films where I rented gear and really I really the visual style was really important to me. That I like to make a lot of really dreamy films, and I like to make a lot of things that but dreamy not in the sense that they are dreams, but in the sense that they take place in this world connected to reality but not reality. And all of the things within it are dealing they're dealing with the world, but you're not always seeing or you're focused on the relationship at the center of the piece. You're not seeing the kind of external factors that are impacting what's going on, I guess. So yeah, so visually and color wise, I really want it to be very light. We shot most of the film is shot in a family friend of mine had this farmhouse 2 hours outside of the city. I'm from Toronto, by the way, I forgot to say that. And so we drove up and shot the majority of it over the course of one day, and had perfect, just the weather worked at the right times, all these things. And then I really wanted to contrast that with the kind of multimedia pieces. So there's the letters, the journal, the photographs, which are what's taking place in the present for the main character. And for me, it felt like you need to be really material, very clean, because I was really interested in exploring the kind of the materials that are tied to memory and how we connect to it. So having that contrast was very important to me. So that's a little bit about the aesthetic of the film, but generally aesthetics are very important to me. So yeah.
Speaking of those moments where we see like the photographs and the letters being in the present, I thought it was a very beautiful choice to instead of having those insert shots take up the entire frame, they're just fragmented in the shot. I thought that was really beautiful. Is that a decision that you made early on in the process, or did that sort of come to you as the film was coming together?
Yeah, that was made quite early on in the process. So for me, when I was thinking about the structure of the film, it really was the memories that she has of the relationship of the past, which are all of the live action stuff, and then the present stuff, multimedia stuff being still. And it actually all so all of the pieces are filmed on this like blanket, which is at the end of the film, the blanket that they sit on or lie on. And so all of those kind of connections, I wanted the present exploration, even though it was supposed to be quite clean. I wanted it to still feel like the character had some kind of hand in it. Like she was taking this, like I always find myself when I'm thinking about going back to an old journal or photographs, like I find that I take the time to like lay them out on my bed and look at them, or like that process of like arranging and interacting with materials, I think is very important. It's very subtle, but yeah. So I in that part and in making it not take up the whole frame, making it kind of feel physical, I wanted to kind of include that element.
Yeah, I think that that personal touch that you add, such subtle notes but personal touches, are really what add to the strength of your film. Thank you for sharing that. Lauren, on your film Tender Hearts, I know we talked about how you shot that on Super 8, and with Super 8, there's no sound recording. So I was wondering if your decision to not include direct sound but captions in the film, was that because of the format in which you were filming, or was that a decision you made as an artistic choice for the aesthetic of this film?
Yeah, so that was kind of a happy accident in post. Not really an accident, but I was originally planning on recording that voiceover after we shot. I ended up shooting this film in my hometown of Pittsburgh. Over a summer, I didn't have that much access to like crew I would usually have or equipment, so we didn't actually record any sound on location. It was all recorded in post. So I had the voiceover written for a few months, and it was just constantly being rewritten. So the text on screen was initially just a placeholder for where I was planning on putting the lines. And then I did a test by myself, just reading it out, and it just felt wrong. It felt too direct. And I grew to really love the text on screen. I think the lack of vocal narration kind of helped with the I don't know, I think both made it more intimate, but then also lended itself to the main character's kind of like hesitancy to really even acknowledge like these feelings or emotions as she's like poking through things. So just sort of ended up working out that way, but I think it was the best choice. So.
Yeah, I think that was such a beautiful decision, and I think as a viewer, it really forces the viewer to spend a little bit more focus on what it is that they're reading instead of just allowing themselves to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that worked very well. Speaking of sound, Connor, one thing that stood out to me in your film is the moment in which Justin's character sort of drowns out all the sound around him. And when his partner is arguing, can you talk a little bit about that choice and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, I mean that moment came with great help from my sound designer and producer Justine, and I always knew that I wanted that moment to be a drown out because it's about the yelling, it's about the noise, but I didn't want what Spencer's character Luke is saying. It's not about the words. It's not about it's not about exactly what is being yelled. It's about attention, and it's about now eyes are on me and I can feel all the eyes. And there's a weird sound that I would always just like that, like almost like blood rushing, like pressure sound that you hear when you're just so overwhelmed. And I wanted to have something feel like that. And so, yeah, Justine did a great job with that. And I originally wrote it so that bubbling and overwhelming sound is interrupted by a very direct opening line in the restaurant. But that didn't feel right in the edit. And I actually found it was really interesting to go right into the restaurant with the quiet ambiance of the restaurant following, because it's almost like Justin is now just there and is now, not even sure what's happened in between, but now I'm in this moment. Yeah, definitely came from experience and was really helped by Justine.
Connor, we also have a great audience question for you. The relationship feels very authentic in this film. How did you create that intimacy as a director?
Yeah, that's always really, really hard, because you want to make sure that, like, first and foremost, everybody feels comfortable as an actor, because if they're not comfortable as an actor, they're not going to be, that's the most important thing. And so it really was just trying to get as much rehearsal time and time together as possible to just like talk with each other. And obviously, unfortunately, my time was limited because it's a student project on a super tight schedule. But yeah, as much time together as possible. And also, I think we shot the intimacy, the morning scene on our last day. And it was, I think it was 4 days. And on our last day, we did the morning. And I think that was a really helpful thing, so that the first 2 days of production were 3 days of production were completely night shoots, and very long, very late hours, which there was a certain bonding that happened there of like, this is a form of torture. This is awful. And everybody just wants to go home. But yeah, I think having that at the top and then ending with the intimacy scene kind of was a, again, first not night that we were shooting, and a great way to have them bond before that.
Yeah, I think that that translates really well. I think that decision to shoot that scene last kind of just, you feel a sense of relief in that scene, and that I think that probably comes a bit from those long, grueling night shoots. Sorry, slight technical difficulty. Give me just one moment, friends. All right, sorry about that. So Tessa, for your film, This is a Teenage Love Letter. I know we talked a bit about the visual style, but there's one specific bit of that stands out to me, and that's that slight bit of animation you have in the beginning that resurfaces at the end. And I think it's very small and subtle, but it's very impactful. And I was wondering if you could please tell us a little bit about that choice of just that little bit of animation.
Yeah, and so originally, like way early in the process, my idea was to not have just the animation at the beginning and end, but have like a series of similar animations kind of tying the past moments into the present moments. And so, but then when I got into editing, it wasn't working and it wasn't needed. But the real idea of it was for that beginning and moment, to the animation for me is tying it back into the main character Catherine's voice and interior, her mind. And there's in the series of present bits, one of the main ones is her journal, which is made up of different drawings and pieces of writing that she's supposed to have made at the time. And so I wanted that that moment at the beginning and end to kind of connect to that, and also for me, like note the live action sequences as like part of her memory. And I guess you don't really understand at the beginning, but at the end and throughout, it becomes clear. So yeah, and also those little faces and the simple things are just like, I'm not a very multifaceted. I mean, I am a multifaceted artist. I'm not a very complex drawing artist, I guess. But I always draw versions of those little face things, and so this film has a lot of me in it, obviously, and so that also felt like a way to bring myself into it a little bit.
I think it also goes to show that sometimes simplicity is the most impactful way to show something or get a point across. We have an audience question for Lauren. Since there's no dialogue in your film, what sort of direction were you giving to the performers during the shoot?
Yeah, so part of that lends itself into who my my actors were. So I was very, very close with both of the women in the film. One of them was one of my childhood best friends, and the other one was a woman that I was working very, very closely with that summer on a lot of projects. So I had, before arriving to the set, because we shot everything in about 1 day. We had already discussed pretty at length like the emotion and like tone of what we were trying to get across, and you know, kind of what I was looking to explore with the piece. And so as we were shooting, we had written up like a number of, you know, kind of scenarios and scenes that we were like working through and playing through, and then just kind of like you know, the lead character, she's kind of like reimagining and reworking through this one afternoon and this day they spent together, and just kind of like, okay, like how, you know, how is she thinking of these things in this moment, or this here if she's feeling this way. And it was a lot of just you know, running through different scenarios, trying things different ways, trying to work through a bunch of different like micro actions or things in that sort, and then shooting on half of them and not shooting on half of them, and seeing what kind of felt right or what worked. Going into it, I knew I had a lot of you know, I mean, it was shot listed and there was a script written, but I wanted to leave room for a lot of, you know, a lot of interpretation, a lot of different, you know, what they might be thinking. So it was kind of a back and forth on like talking through stuff, or like me yelling like open the door open the door wider or something, like as we're shooting. So
and I think also the fact that you're shooting without synchronized sound kind of gives you some freedom to be a little bit more like direct and loud with your direction.
Definitely helped.
Well, on that note as well, since you both wrote and directed this film, did you find it difficult to sort of like split those roles and find distinctions between them, or did you kind of accept the sort of meshing between them?
Do you want to go first, or?
Sorry, this was directed at Lauren, but I was also going to ask this question to everybody. But just since we were already speaking, sorry, I should have specified. But
yeah, sorry,
Lauren,
I wasn't sure if you meant Tessa. Yeah, so it was pretty seamless transition in the case of this project. I think because it was such an intimate piece that I was writing, and I knew that it was going to be a very small crew and a very small amount of people. It would have felt weird for me to kind of hand this off to someone else. I don't think I've ever written a script for another person, or really, and even then, if I'm taking on a project that someone else has written, it's always been a lot more like more of a deep personal connection. So it was, yeah, definitely pretty. It made sense for the project.
And then we'll go with Connor next, if you could answer the same question.
Sorry, repeat all that fastest of the question for me, please.
Yeah, I just wanted you to maybe talk a little bit about your experience being both a writer and director of this film.
Right. I was also thinking about the, you know, I usually write and direct all of my scripts too, and this was no different here. And I was thinking about my other experiences that I've had where I've written a script and then handed it off, and it's just a completely different experience. It's really nice to be able to write and direct because you have the complete freedom with the script, and you have when you're there on the day, you're not feeling stuck to something or feeling confined to someone else's work. You have that complete ability to, on the day, this dialogue's not working, let's change it. And I'm very much of the thinking that the dialogue has to work for the performers rather than for me. And so I really want them to be able to play around and experiment. And obviously, so many lessons came away from this project. One of them was that while that can be true, I had left one scene open, very open-ended, where like I wasn't happy with the dialogue I had written, and so I was kind of trying to get the two performers to find the dialogue themselves and let's just banter. But like that's really hard to do, and especially when they're talking about backstory that's not themselves. And so there's a balance where like I need to be there to give them everything that they need, but I need to also be able to let them know as the director, hey, this is like not somebody else's script. We can do whatever we want to it. And it was really interesting going into the editing room for this because similarly, I also edit a lot of what I do, and it was really weird kind of handing over the keys to someone. But it was a great experience. It was my first time having a separate editor, and it was really interesting just to see what someone does with the footage when they weren't there directing it.
I think that's also a good point that for the majority of us that that go to film school and learn in that environment how to become a filmmaker, we're kind of expected to take on so many roles, and we kind of get used to, writing, directing, producing, editing our own films, sometimes even acting in them ourselves. And we kind of have to remind ourselves, like, that's not the norm. That's not what's always going to be expected of us. So I think that's a really great point about like being comfortable handing your film to somebody else and waiting for what the product is going to be. I think that can definitely teach us all a lot about being filmmakers. Tessa, for you, I'm actually going to pivot to a different question because we got an audience question for you. They said the camera movement is very impressive, particularly during the walking scenes. Can you talk about your approach to camera movement in the film?
Yeah, for sure. So all of the memory sequences, the camera movement was really important because I really wanted the scenes to feel active and intimate. And I think that with a still camera, you can feel that with closeness in a way, with how close you are to the actors, but like to move with them and to kind of to stay with them on their journey and to have the camera be a part of the journey instead of at a distance from it and witnessing it felt really important to me. The actual like practical bit of it had kind of like a steady cam rig moment. That was like the first time that I'd used it, and it was hard. And lots of it did not work. But yeah, I think my favorite movement piece is the final scene of them walking up to the blanket and going to lie down. And so I was working with my friend who was mostly doing cinematography for me, except that I was standing over his shoulder telling him what to do the whole time. But that last sequence I shot, and so walking up with them was on the rig. But then I decided in that moment that I wanted to do a shot of like the lying down with them from the perspective of each girl. And so we had to do a few takes where it was just like me and the camera, and it's like did not look pretty of me like lying down to make sure and like holding it as tight as possible so it wouldn't shake and fall and keeping it in focus. So I think personally I'm most proud of that. But yeah, generally that kind of like movement is about the intimacy piece for me. So yeah.
You touched on the fact that the Steadicam was new for you, and you were very proud of what that camera movement that you ended up with. So on that same note, Lauren, what do you think the biggest lesson you learned? I'm sorry, what was the biggest lesson you learned and your biggest takeaway from creating this film?
Yeah, in terms of like technically with camera work, or just in general?
Just in general, like when you sort of look at this film, what's the first thing that comes to mind is like, this is what I'm proud of, or this is what I most like about this film?
Yeah, I think definitely that sometimes the best thing you can do for a project is just like pushing it to the side. I think I went to film school. I graduated from Syracuse University in 2020. But I think in film school, it's so easy that you're constantly like whipping out projects or like shorts. You don't really have that time to think about something. And Tender Hearts was a project that I got a grant to shoot over the summer after my junior year, and so I was able to take a lot of time in pre-production, just kind of think about what I wanted, and I was able to work pretty intimately with people. But then coming back out of the summer and going back into school, I was just feeling really burned out with the project, and I was just kind of like not really sure if it was working or not. And so I put it aside for like 2 months, and I think that was the best thing I could have done for the film, because I think coming back into it with fresh eyes, I think I was able to more objectively look at it and be like, this is working, this is not working. I ended up cutting half of the original narration voiceover that I had written, that I was really married to a lot of it. But I don't know, I kept reading it and I was like, this feels like too much, like I'm being too direct, or this is too flowery, or too too short or something. So I ended up most of it, it's still a lot of the original writing, but I ended up cutting a lot of it, and I think that really was the benefit. So I think definitely that sometimes more time is in your favor if you can afford it. If you don't need to finish a film for whatever reason and it doesn't feel ready, sometimes just like waiting until you're ready to finish it is the best thing you can do for the project. So
yeah, I think that's a really great point. Sometimes you just can't force a film. You have to let the film come to you, and if you try to force it, it's not going to turn out how it should. And Connor, I'd like to ask you that same question, just to reiterate, what are you most proud of about this film, or what's your biggest takeaway from making this film?
Right. Yeah, I was completely agreeing with Lauren there about taking time away from a script. For me, as like a writer side of it, is so important, because you find just so much so many new things when you come back to something and you're like, oh, this can go there, and oh, absolutely, it's not a problem. I am a very anxious filmmaker, and so a lot of this project was about trying to navigate making something that's so personal on such a tight schedule with so little money, and like it's everyone's problem making a movie ever. And I think I'm proud that it came out the way that it did, and I really tried with this project to it's kind of hard to, it's weird to say, but like force myself into linearity. Like I really wanted to see how much, because the school's project time limit was 5 minutes for this. And so I was really determined to see, like, can I really fit what feels like a full, like 3-act like thing into this? And from a structure perspective, try to just play at it from that angle. And so I'm proud with how that came out. My biggest takeaway is probably the same as Lauren. Like, it needs time, and I think I should have spent more time on the script. My producer of this project will tell you I was still writing the last scenes after we had shot the first scenes, and the week leading up to the second weekend, I was like, she's like, do you have those pages for me yet? And I said, they're in the bedroom. They're just got to figure out what they're saying. So yeah, I can tend to really avoid confronting a problem with the story and with a movie when I don't know the answer. And I think just like I have found on this project, and I have found on projects since, that just sitting with it and sitting with the project and sitting with the story it is the best thing to do, rather than avoiding it because you're scared of what'll happen. And so, yeah, I'm proud of how it turned out.
Well, on that note, we are unfortunately coming to the end of our time for this discussion. I want to just thank you all so much for sharing your work with us and for joining me for this discussion today. It was really wonderful talking to you all. I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed the films, and I hope you all have time to check out the other programs in the festival. And thank you so much for coming. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.